Now for the question color, we can simply add the style argument here to the text widget and set this to a value of type text style with help of the text style constructor function, and set this to a color of white, like this. With that, we got a white text color. So that wasn't too special. But for the buttons here, I now want to make sure that I can style them such that I don't have to copy and paste the same style to all my buttons. Because at the moment here, I have 3 buttons, and if I want to apply some style here, for example to the first button, I can of course do that with the style argument, and then by using elevated button style from, as we also did it for the outlined button on the start screen, for example, but I would have to repeat that for all my buttons here. And that quickly gets annoying, and if I ever want to change the styling, I also have to do that for all buttons. And that's why this here is a great example and a great use case for creating another custom widget, so that we have another reusable building block that has this styling that we want for our buttons built in. And for that, I'll add another file here in my lib folder, and I'll name it answer button.dart, like this. And in there, we can create a new class, answer button. And here, since I want to build a widget, I will extend one of the widget classes. And for this button, I can extend the stateless widget class, because even though it's a button that can be tapped, I have no state that would need to be managed inside of that button. Therefore, it's a stateless widget. And of course, as always, we import Flutter material Dart here. And we add this build method, as we always do, accepting this context argument with or without this type annotation, doesn't matter. And then inside of the body of this build method, we return our widget or combination of widgets. And in my case, it's this elevated button which I want to return there. So I cut this from questions screen and instead return this here with a semicolon at the end. And now we'll be able to set up our styling here and then reuse this answer button in the questions screen. So in this column here, we'll be able to use the answer button a couple of times. And all these buttons will then have the same styling because the styling is locked into our custom widget. That's the plan. Now, of course, the text that's set on this button should be set from outside this button, though. It should not be locked into this button. And of course, you might already know how this works, because you learned how to make your widgets configurable in the previous course section as well. We can add a constructor function here, answer button, and a property, in this case the answer text, for example, which should be a string. And then here in this constructor function, we can accept and set the answer text argument, and also accept and forward that key argument here, this named key argument. And then we can use answer text, which we get as an argument and which we store in this class variable, down there as a value for this text, so that this text is actually set from outside this widget. This now can't be const anymore, though, because answer text is now a variable. Actually one that doesn't change, but still. The text widget can no longer be used in conjunction with the const keyword here. That's not all I want to accept here, though. Instead, this function, which is set as a value for on pressed on the button, should also be coming from outside, so should also be settable from inside questions screen, so that we can then in the end pass our answer text to this answer widget, and then as a second argument also our function that should be executed when the button is pressed, for example. And to achieve this, we must accept another argument, a positional or named argument, that is up to you, as part of this answer button. And for that, I'll add another property here, which should be of type function that actually returns no value. So I want to get a function that returns no value. And I'll name this one here onTap. The name is up to you, though. And accept another argument, which is also named onTap, and which is then automatically used as a value for this property by adding this dot in front of it. And then it's this onTap variable that can be used as a value for onPressed here. OnTapped is the function which we receive as an argument and which we then use as a value for onPressed on the elevated button, and therefore we'll be able to pass a function here to the answer widget when we use it in another widget, like here in questions screen, so that we can define which function should in the end be executed when this button is pressed from inside the widget where we use our custom answer widget. And of course, all these positional arguments here could also be set up as named arguments. And just to also show you how this would work, I'll actually convert these positional to named arguments, not because you have to, but because it can be interesting to see how this could be done. You simply place these arguments between these curly braces in your argument list here then. And now you must add required, the extra required keyword in front of them, because by default in Dart, named arguments are optional, but here we need values to make sure that this answer button widget works correctly, and therefore we must make them non-optional by adding the required keyword in front of the named arguments. Besides that, they now work like positional arguments. They can receive values, and these values are then forwarded, thanks to the this keyword, to the properties that have the same names. So answer text to answer text and onTap to onTap. Now we can turn this into a const constructor function. This is possible here now for this widget. And therefore now in questions screen, we can use this widget by first of all adding an import, where we import from advanced basics and then from answer button.dart. And with this import added down here, you can now use this answer button widget. And since I'm now expecting named arguments here, you have to target these arguments by name. So answer text and onTap. And you could also change the order here now, because for named arguments, this order is not important. It's just important that you set all required arguments and that you target those arguments by their name. That being said, I'll go back to the other order because that makes a bit more sense for me here. And with that, we now could reuse this answer button here for answer 1 and answer 2 and answer 3. But of course, we haven't changed the styling yet. So that's what I'll do next. Now to change the styling, I'll go back to my answer button widget here. And there I already added the style argument to elevated button. And I'm using the style from method on elevated button to easily generate such a style object. But now we need to pass some arguments to style from to really change the styling. And for me, that changes with the background color of these buttons. Here I want to use a color, maybe some purple color, but actually I'll use that color picker again to pick a dark bluish purple color here maybe. Something like this. And we can now add const in front of that. And I also want to change the foreground color, so the text color, and set this simply to white, like this. If we now save that, all buttons have this style, even though we changed it just in one place, because we did it in our custom widget, which we're reusing a couple of times. Now that's a good start, but I actually also want to change the shape of these buttons a little bit. And for that, we can set the shape argument here, still in this style from method, and set this to a specific shape that is actually also suggested here if I open this suggestion menu by pressing Ctrl space. And here it's this rounded rectangle border shape which I want. With this constructor function, I can create a configuration object for my buttons that allows me to add some nicely rounded corners to the button. For that, this rounded rectangle border constructor function wants a border radius argument, which can be set to border radius circular using another class and constructor function provided by Flutter. All these things here are provided by Flutter. And border radius circular simply adds some rounded corners, and you can set the radius, and you can simply try out different numbers here, but 40 should achieve the look which I want to have here for this application. With that, if we save this, we have some nice rounded off corners, and the buttons should now look something like this. And now I just want to add more padding, so more internal spacing between the text and the borders of that button. So that padding here should be increased. And that can also be done with this style object. In there, anywhere in this style from method, you can add the padding argument and set this to a value with the edge insets class provided by Flutter. And you could use edge insets all to apply the same padding in all directions. But here I actually want to have different horizontal and vertical padding, and this can be achieved by using the special symmetric constructor function. This constructor function allows you to set separate paddings for horizontal and vertical padding. And here for vertical padding, so top and bottom, I want to have a value of 10 and set horizontal to 40 maybe. And now we can add const in front of this. And if you now save this, the buttons should look like that. And of course you can also change them, tweak this a bit more to your liking, but of course keep in mind that this is all just some dummy text right now, which will soon be replaced with the actual question text and the actual answers. But for me right now, that is the look I want to have, and I'll tweak it a bit more later. But as a next step, I'd actually like to use the actual question text and the actual answers that we prepared in this questions Dart file.